going to cover the topic Early Vedic Age. Hello, aspirants. Welcome back to this Ancient India learning series. Today, we are going to cover the topic Early Vedic Age. So, in the previous session, we had a discussion on Vedic Age, where we understood the broad framework of Vedic Age, that it is divided into Early Vedic Age and Later Vedic Age. Also, we understood the theory of Aryan invasion and the sources for the Vedic Age. Okay. Today, we are going to specifically focus on the Early Vedic Age. Now, if you look at the timeline of the early Vedic age, it begins from 1500 BC and it continues up to 1000 BC. All right. Now, when I say early Vedic age, it is also referred to as Rig Vedic age or the Rig Vedic period. So, if you remember in the previous session, we understood that the major source for the early Vedic age is Rig Veda. The major composition of Rig Veda pertains to the early Vedic age, and hence early Vedic age is also called as the Rig Vedic age. So sometimes in UPSC Prelims or in mains, they refer to Rig Vedic age in the question. So at that time, you have to understand that they are asking you about the early Vedic age only. Okay. Now, in the Rig Vedic age or in the early Vedic age, Aryans just came and settled in the Indian subcontinent. So it is the beginning of Aryans' settlement period in India. Okay. And when Aryans came in India, as we know that from Iran, they migrated to India in batches. Fine. So initially, they settled down in an area that was the northwest part of Indian subcontinent, where originally the Indus Valley civilization thrived and flourished. Okay. Now, this area is the area of Sapta Sindhu Basin. That is the area of 7 rivers. Aryans referred to this area as Brahmavarta. Brahmavarta meaning land of God. Okay, Brahmavarta. So Aryans called this area as Brahmavarta, land of gods, and this is mentioned in Rigved. Fine, land of gods. Fine. Now, when I say Sapta Sindhu Basin, so we are referring to which rivers? Let us try to understand this. Okay. Now, Sapta means what? 7. So we are referring here to 7 rivers. So the first river is Sindhu. Sindhu, that is the river Indus. Okay. Plus 5 tributaries of Indus. Plus one more river, that is the ancient river Saraswati. So this total area where the 7 rivers, okay, drained their waters, that is called as the Sapta Sindhu Basin or the land of 7 rivers. Okay. Now, from the examination perspective, you need to remember their Sanskrit names as well as their English names, okay? Because many a times in UPSC, they ask the match the column, and in 2026 preliminary examination, they had asked this question, okay? So you should be aware about their names. Sorry. Okay. So let us have a look at the rivers and their names so that it will become clear. So if you look at this river Sindhu, Sindhu, we all know that it is nothing but the river Indus. Okay. Now, these are the 5 tributaries of Indus. The very first is Jhelum. Jhelum, it was known as Vitasta. So you can remember this as VJ. V for Vitasta, J for Jhelum. Okay. Askini is nothing but your river Chenab. So you can remember this as AC. A for Askini, C for Chenab. Okay. Then the next river is Parushuni. Okay. Parushuni is nothing but your river Ravi. PR. Okay. Then Vipasha. Vipasha is nothing but your Bias river. Now, I used to remember this as Vipasha, Vipasha. Vipasha corresponds with the name Vipasha Basu. So, B for Vipasha and B for Bias. Okay. So, Vipasha, Vipasha, Bias. Like that you can remember. Then the next is Satudri. Satudri is very simple. It refers to river Satluj. And finally, the mighty river, which is now lost, that is Saraswati. Okay. So this land is called as Sapta Sindhu Basin. Okay. Sapta Sindhu Basin. Fine. So when Aryans came to India, Aryans settled down in this area. Fine. And up to 1000 BC, Aryans were in this area. Now, the next important thing, when Aryans came to India, now, first of all, we all should remember that Aryans refer to what? A speech group. Okay. A linguistic group or a speech group. Why speech group? Because Aryans are known for the languages which they spoke. And the prominent language which they spoke like the group of languages they spoke, as you all know, Indo-European group of languages. And out of that, the one language which they introduced in the Indian subcontinent was the classical Sanskrit language. Okay. So please remember this. Aryans is a speech group. It is a linguistic group. Okay. Now, when Aryans entered into India, first of all, they were a warrior community, a warrior clan. So they were fighters. Okay. They knew horse riding. They had chariots, horse chariots. Okay. So you should be aware about this. The second important thing about Aryans is that they were nomadic in nature. Nomadic in nature in the sense they were pastoral people. Pastoral people whose primary occupation was cattle rearing. So they used to do cattle rearing and that was their primary. So let us now try to understand the different aspects of Aryan's life. So first we are going to discuss the political structure of Aryans in the early Vedic period or in the Rig Vedic period. As we know that Aryans were nomadic people, the primary occupation was pastoralism, that is cattle rearing, and they were tribal in nature. Okay, so they were basically organized into different tribes. Hence, the political structure of Aryans in the early Vedic period was tribal in nature. So it was referred to as a tribal polity. Okay. So within the Aryans, there were different tribal clans. And every clan had a chief. And he was referred to as the tribal chief. Tribal chief was called as Rajan. Okay, so we called Raja. So like that, Rajan was the term for the tribal chief. Fine. Now, what was the duty of Rajan? So the duty of the Rajan was to protect his tribe. Next important thing, to safeguard the cattle. So as cattle rearing was the primary occupation of Aryans, pastoralism was the primary occupation. So it was the duty of the Rajan to protect the cattle wealth. Next important thing, to lead the wars. And finally, Rajan used to perform the religious duties. He used to perform yajna for the welfare of his tribe. Okay. Now, if you look at the political structure or the units, social units of Aryan, the very first unit was the basic unit of family. Now, whomsoever was the senior most head in the family, that person was called as the head of the family. Head of the family, Grihapati. Okay. So, for example, in a family, there used to be a grandfather. So, since the grandfather is the eldest male member in that family, that person used to be the head of the family, Grihapati. And only senior most male could be the Grihapati. Okay, so in a way, society was patriarchal in nature. Okay, so the head of the family was the senior most male member. He was referred to as Grihapati. Now, group of families together formed a Kula. Okay, so for example, there are 5, 6 families. Together they formed one Kul. We see now, this is our Kul. So like that, a group of families together formed a Kul. Within that Kul, whomsoever was the senior most male member, that person was considered as the head of that Kul. And he was called as Kulapati. Okay. Similarly, different kuls together formed one village. Okay, so for example, there are 3 kuls, K1, K2, K3 in a particular area. So that particular area became one Grama, one village. Okay, and there used to be head of that village. He was referred to as Gramini. So Gramini was the head of that Grama, that village. Okay, now group of villages formed a you can say that taluka level like organization. So today we have group of villages together, they form a taluka. On the similar lines, during the Rig Vedic period, group of villages formed Vishya. Vishya, you can refer to it as a taluka, block or a district, okay, in the modern terminology. So for example, this is one Grama, G1. There is one more Grama, G2. There is one more Grama, G3. Together, these 3 formed one district, which was called as Vishya. And there used to be a one head of that Vishya. He was called as Vishayapati. Okay. Then finally, a group of Vishyas. So for example, 2, 3 Vishyas together formed one territory, one tribal territory. And the head of that tribal territory was Rajan. And that territory was called as Jana. Okay, so Jana was the highest political unit, and this Jana was headed by the tribal chief. He was referred to as Rajan. So please remember this hierarchy of the Aryans organization. Okay, so at the lowest level, we had family. The eldest senior male member in the family was the head of the family, referred to as Grihapati. Group of families formed a Kula. The senior most male member in that entire Kula was referred to as Kulapati. Group of Kulas formed one village known as Grama. Head of the Grama was referred to as Gramini. Similarly, group of villages formed one district, you can say one taluka or a district in the modern terminology, which was referred to as Vishya. So head of the Vishya was referred to as Vishapati. And finally, that entire 2-3 Vishyas formed one tribal territory, and that was referred to as Jana. And head of that Jana was referred to as the tribal chief known as Rajan. All right. So in Rig Vedic age, Rajan was the tribal chief. Now, Rajan was also attributed by other names. Like, for example, he was called as Gopati. He was called as Gopa. Now, what is this Gopati or Gopa? This Gopati or Gopa, these words come from Go. Go means cow. So, for Aryans, the wealth was cow. Okay, so for Aryans, the cattle, cow was their main wealth. The person who had maximum number of cattle, that person was considered to be the most wealthy one. And as a result, it was the duty of the Rajan, it was the duty of the tribal chief to protect the cattle wealth. So battles were fought in order to protect the cattle wealth. And as a result, Rajan was also called as Gopati, the one who is the protector of the cows or Gopa. Okay, and his queen, his wife was called as Mahisi. Mahisi was the name of his, was the title, attribute given to the queen. Okay, I hope this basic political structure of Aryans is pretty clear. Okay, so you need to remember this. First point, you need to remember that Aryans were tribal in nature, they were nomadic in nature, the main occupation was pastoralism. Hence, the political structure was tribal in nature. Okay, and the organization, family, then Kula, then Grama, then Vishya, and Jana. Okay, head of the family was Grihapati, head of the Kula was Kulapati, head of the Grama village was Gramini, head of the Vishya was Vishapati, and finally, Rajan was the head of the Jana. Rajan was the tribal chief. Since he was the protector of the cows, he was also known as Gopa or Gopati. And his queen was referred to as Mahishi. Okay, I hope this basic terminology is intelligible. Okay, now let us try to understand the assemblies which were a dominant political characteristics or the feature of the polity of the Aryans in the early Vedic period. Okay, now in the early Vedic period, there were 4 important assemblies that existed. Okay, so the primary assembly, the most important one, or that was the oldest one, was Vidatha. Okay, so as you can see over here, Vidatha was the. So first of all, what do you mean by assembly? Assembly is council of members which used to help the king in delivering his important functions. Okay, so tribal assemblies like Sabha, Samiti, Vidatha, Gana, they had different functions. So deliberative function, discussion on the important issues, military assistance to the king, religious assistance to the king. Okay, so all these roles, all these functions were performed by these different assemblies. Okay, out of all these assemblies, the most important one was Vidatha. So Vidatha was the oldest of all the assemblies, and it was the most important assembly. So this assembly used to advise Rajan on all the matters which are related to the judicial aspect, military aspect, and religious aspect. Okay, so whenever Rajan needed any advice, he needed any help, he used to refer the matter to the Vidatha. In Vidatha, there used to be a deliberation, discussion on that matter, and finally, they used to give advice, recommendation to the Rajan, and Rajan used to act accordingly. So, most important assembly was the Vidatha that you need to remember. Okay. The second important assembly was Sabha. So Sabha was the second important one. Sabha was basically council of elders. So all the senior citizens, okay? So senior citizens, in that particular territory. So there was a tribal territory which was referred to as Jana. So in that tribal territory, all the senior citizens used to gather together and they used to form an assembly, and that assembly was called as Sabha, Council of Elders. So this was yet another important assembly. They used to also provide advice to the Rajan on different topics. So whenever Rajan needed any guidance, he used to come to this Council of Elders and seek their assistance. Okay. Now, the third assembly was Samiti. Now, Samiti was a very special assembly and it used to meet on special occasions. First of all, what was the role of Samiti? Okay. Now, for that, we need to understand the role of Rajan and the attribute of Rajan. Now, Rajan role we know. Now, how was Rajan elected? In the Rig Vedic period or in the early Vedic period, Rajan was elected. Rajan was not a hereditary chief. Usually, we see that kings are hereditary. Hereditary means what? The eldest son of the king becomes the next king, right? So, whomsoever is the eldest son of that particular king will be the next king in line. But in the early Vedic period, kingship was not hereditary. So, king was not hereditary. Basically, Samiti, a special body was formed. That body used to decide who will be the king. An election used to happen, and that election was conducted by the Samiti. The members of the Samiti used to cast their vote, and accordingly, the chief was elected. So, this was a very important attribute of the Aryan polity in the early Vedic period, that their king Rajan was not hereditary in nature. Rajan was elected. And who used to elect Rajan? A special Sabha was created, a special body was created for the election of chief, and that body was Samiti. So, Samiti was a very special body which used to meet on special occasions, and such as election of the Rajan. Fine, I hope it is clear. And finally, you had the last assembly, Gana. Gana was the local assembly of the people. Like today, we have Gram Sabha in the Panchayati Raj institutions. Similarly, at that point of time, Gana was there, the assembly of the local people. Okay. So, in the Rig Vedic age, assemblies played a very important role, and these assemblies were very crucial because they used to impart advice to the king. Most importantly, the power was not vested in the hand of a single authority. So, power was not vested in the hands of the Rajan. Rajan had to take all his decisions on the basis of the advice of these assemblies. Getting it? So, as a result, this is the proper example of decentralization of power, where the power is not in the hands of one person, power is devolved. And these assemblies used to check that Rajan is not becoming over powerful. Okay. So, this was a check mechanism that one person is not gaining all the power and one person is not controlling entire authority. So, this was a check mechanism on the arbitrary powers of Rajan. So, this was a very important characteristic feature of the early Vedic period, which you should be aware about. Okay. So, please remember the four assemblies. The first is Vidatha, the oldest one, and this was the most important assembly because this assembly used to advise Rajan on all the key matters: judicial, religious, military, all the matters. Okay. Sabha was a council of elder members. Samiti, a special body which used to meet on special occasions, especially for the election of the Rajan. And finally, the local assembly, which you can compare with the present day Grama Sabha, that was Gana. Okay. So, when you look at the Rajan, the next important thing about the Rajan is that the Raj did not maintain any regular army or a standing army. So, like today, we have a proper dedicated army of a state, okay? Or in the later part, also in the ancient Indian history, every king had a proper army with the different sections, okay? But in the early Vedic period, it was a rudimentary form. Rudimentary form in the sense, see, Aryans, they came in India, Indian subcontinent. Just now they began to settle down in India. So definitely you cannot expect that they will have an elaborate administrative framework. No, it was not possible. Okay. So at that point of time, whatever army they had, it was not a professional, regular standing army. Rather, whenever king was in need of army or whenever he had to fight a war, he used to give call to his clan members, and all the clan members, male members, they used to join the king in the wars. Are you getting it? So there was no proper standing army, a dedicated army was not there. Whenever king had to fight a war, he used to give call to his tribal men, to his clan members, and the clan members used to assist the king in fighting the wars. Okay. Now, as I've mentioned that the chief Rajan was usually elected by a tribal assembly. Samiti was the assembly that used to elect the Rajan, and this was very much important because this exercised or this functioned as a check on the authority of the chief. Okay, so all these assemblies acted as a check on the power of the king. Otherwise, see, if there is no check mechanism, if there is no one to question the king, definitely king can become an overpowerful person. He may become a dictator, right? So as a result, it is very crucial that you have a check mechanism who will, or that mechanism will put a check on the authority of the king. So that function was provided by, or was performed by, these assemblies. And out of that, Samiti was the specific assembly that elected the Rajan. Okay. Now, what about the taxation system and all? So, see, this was, as I've clearly mentioned, it was the beginning of a forming of a kingdom, of a tribal kingdom. So, the things were not formalized. Okay. Bali was one tribute which was given to the Rajan. This was in the name of religion. So, it was called as a religious tribute. Okay. But again, it was not compulsory, it was voluntary in nature. So, voluntary in nature, if you wish to give something to Rajan, you may give it as per your choice. And during that time, the tribute was given in kind. So whatever you produce, like for example, if you're producing rice, give it to Rajan. If you are producing some pottery, give it to Rajan as a tribute, as a mark of respect. Okay. So that was called as Bali. So please remember, Bali was a religious tribute. It was not a formal taxation. It was a tribute which was given to Rajan, and it was voluntary in nature. Voluntary depends upon you, whether you want to give it, how much you want to give, what you want to give, it's up to you. Okay. Now, the next important part of early Vedic period is that position of women. So women were equally respected as men. And the most important thing is that women were allowed to be a part of these assemblies. So whether you take example of Vidatha, you take assembly of Sabha, okay, everywhere women were allowed to participate. So women especially participate in Vidatha. In Vidatha, women scholars participated in political discussions, deliberations, and women scholars were allowed to keep their viewpoints. So, the most important aspect is that women were allowed to be a part of these assemblies. So, if there is a statement in prelims that whether women were allowed to be a part of Vidatha in the Rig Vedic period, correct or incorrect, it is absolutely correct. Okay, so please remember this. Now, examples of the tribal kingdoms, as I've mentioned, that Aryans were divided into tribal clans. Okay, so they were named as, the very first and the very famous Aryan clan was Bharatas. So, clan of Bharatas, and indeed, after Bharatas, our country got the name Bharat. Okay, then the next clan was the Matsya clan, then Yadu clan, and Purus. So, these were the famous tribal clans of the Rig Vedic period, whose names are mentioned in Rig Veda. So please remember all these important aspects. Okay. So I hope the political structure of the Rig Vedic age or the early Vedic age is pretty clear. Okay. So what all points you need to remember? The political structure of Aryans was basically, it was tribal in nature. Okay. Please remember this structure: family, Kula, Grama, Vishya, and Jana. The head of Jana was Rajan. His main duty was to protect the cattle, protect the tribes, and hence he was also called as Gopa or Gopati. Okay, attributed to cow, protector of cows. Okay, that you need to remember. Please remember all these assemblies: Vidhat, Sabha, Samiti, and Gana. Which assembly elected the Rajan? Samiti. Okay, were women allowed to be the part of these assemblies? Yes, absolutely correct. Okay, then Rajan did not maintain a formal army. Then, whenever he had to fight a war, he used to give a call, and the tribal men, the men of his clan, used to assist him. Okay, and the tribute was called as Bali. It was a religious tribute, and it was voluntary in nature. Fine. Examples of the tribal kingdoms: Bharatas, Matsya, Yadus, and Purus. Fine. Now let us try to understand the social structure of Aryans. So we have understood the political structure of Aryans. Now let us try to understand the social structure of Aryans. Fine. So we already know that the basic unit of Aryans was family. So family with the family members was a basic unit. Further, the group of families formed a Kula. Okay, one particular Kula, a group of 4 or 5 families used to form it. Okay. Now, the most important thing about the early Vedic period is that caste system was not present. Okay, people had the freedom, people had the liberty to choose their occupation as per their choice. So occupation was not based on birth. Okay, there is one hymn in Rig Veda where it is mentioned that a person is writing that in my family, my father is a carpenter, My mother milks the cows. Okay, so she is taking care of the cattles in the family. My father is a carpenter. Okay, my brother, he is he is a teacher. So brother was a teacher. He used to impart education to the people in his community, and he himself was he was a chariot maker. Okay, so what does this particular hymn in Rig Veda shows that in one family you had so many diverse occupations. So this shows what in the Rig Vedic people had the liberty, people had the freedom to choose their own occupation. Occupation was not based on birth. Okay, so please remember this. The society in the Rig Vedic period or in the early Vedic period was not divided on the caste lines. Occupation was not based on birth. Members of a single family could adopt different occupations. Okay, so remember that. The next important thing was about the position of women. So women enjoyed a very respectable position in the Rig Vedic age. Rather, Rig Vedic age is considered to be a golden age for women. Okay. Now, why it is considered to be a golden age for women? If you remember in the political part, we understood that women were allowed to participate in the tribal assemblies. They were allowed to participate in political discussions, in Vidatha, in Sabha. Okay. So, like that, in the social matters also, women had many rights. Now, what were the rights for women? First of all, the most important right was to choose her own life partner. That was a very important right which Rig Vedic age offered to women. Okay, if you guys have seen Mahabharata and Ramayana, you might have seen about the Swayamvar ceremony. Okay, the Swayamvar of Sita, Swayamvar of Draupadi. Okay, where Swayamvars were organized and women had a right that she could keep one particular task as a qualifying criteria for her future husband. Okay, so like for example, for Draupadi, the task which was kept was to hit the eye of the rotating fish, which Arjuna did it, and Arjuna finally married Draupadi. So, like that, Swayamvars were organized, and women had a right to choose her own husband. Second important thing, we do not find any incidents of Sati Pratha. What is Sati Pratha? Whenever a husband dies, in the funeral fire of the husband, a woman has to jump and even she has to get burnt and die along with the husband. The logic for Sati is that you will, if you want, or it is said that the one husband will be there with you for 7 lives, for 7 births. So you die with with that same husband, so that you both will be reborn together, or and you will get the same husband in the next life as well. Okay, so that was a Sati Pratha that was prevalent. Okay, but in the Rig Vedic age, there is no incidences of Sati Pratha being performed. So Sati is the evolution in the later part of ancient Indian history. Okay. The next important system, there is no incidences of Parda system. What is Parda? Where women has to take a ghungat and she has to hide her face. Okay, so that the elder male members could not see her. Even this Parda system did not exist in the Rig Vedic age. So Rig Vedic age is considered to be a golden age for women, where she was allowed to participate in political discussions. She had right to choose her own life partner. There are no incidences of no incidences of not marriage, no incidences of child marriage. Most important. Okay, so whatever references we have got from Rig Veda, it clearly mentions that there are no incidences of child marriage in the Rig Vedic age. The age which our archaeologists and historians have calculated for marriage, the marriageable age was 16 or 17. Okay, so both male and female, they used to marry in this age. So definitely there are no evidences of child marriage, no evidences of sati, no evidences of parda system, and hence it is considered to be a glorious period for women. Okay, now there are names of certain women scholars which you are expected to remember. The notable women poets whose compositions are mentioned in the early Rig Vedic part, these are Apala, Vishwavara, Ghosha, and Lopamutra. So please remember the names of the women scholars: Apala, Vishwavara, Ghosha, and Lopamutra. Okay, so what you can conclude from the social structure, indeed, it was a glorious period for women. Okay, and do remember all these important points. Do remember the names of the women poet. Okay, Apala, Vishwavara, Ghosha, and Lopamutra. Now, let us try to understand the Vedic religion, okay, Rig Vedic religion. Now, see here, Rig Vedic religion, the society was very simple, okay. they worship the forces of nature. So the forces of nature were personified. Personified, they were given the attribute of a god. So forces of nature, like for example, fire, wind, rain, okay, Mother Earth. So they were personified. They were personified as they are the deities. Okay. So the primary and the most important deity of the Rig Vedic age or the early Vedic period, which is prominently mentioned in Rig Veda, he was Indra. So Indra was the primary deity of the early Vedic age. Okay. So the greatest god of the Aryans was Indra. There are literally 250 hymns which are attributed to Indra in Rig Veda. Okay. So remember this. Indra was called as Purandar. Purandar, the breaker of forts. As I've mentioned that it is believed that these forts are nothing but the citadels of the Harappan people. So Aryans came, they destroyed the citadels of the Harappan people, and they regarded Indra as their primary deity, and they regarded him as the Purandar. He has given them the permission to destroy this forts. Okay, and Indra was also called as the rain god. So whenever they wanted rain to come, they used to pray to Indra. So the first god was Indra. Okay, the second god was Agni. So the second most important god was Agni, fire god. Okay, now it was considered to be an intermediary between God and men. So if you want to say anything, if you want to pass any message, if you want to pass your prayer to Almighty, it is said that in the Agni in the Havan Kund, you have to put the ghee, and along with that ghee, you have to say Swaha, so that it will be converted into smoke. And that smoke will go to Almighty, and your message will reach to Almighty. So Agni was considered to be the second most important god of the Rig Vedic Aryans, and Agni was considered to be an intermediary between God and men. Okay, so all the messages would be conveyed to God through that fire. Okay, the next important god was Varun. Okay, so Varun was third important god. Varun was the god of water, oceans, of rivers, of clouds. Okay, see, specifically, rain god was Indra. But apart from that, whatever water bodies were there, that is normal rivers, oceans, clouds, okay, that god was Varun. Apart from that, there was one more important duty which was given to Varuna. He was the protector of the cosmic order, Rita. Okay, and this was the UPSC PYQ. The PYQs will be discussed in the separate session. Okay, so what is Rita or what is cosmic order? Now, see here, there are no explanations for the existence of this universe. We cannot explain why the universe exists, why there is a galaxy, or why sun is the center of our galaxy, why all the planets are rotating across sun. We cannot give any scientific explanation for this. Why? Because this is the nature of the universe, and this is called as Reet or Rita. Rita, that is the cosmic order which is being carried from generations to generations. And today also, this order is followed. Okay. So Varun was considered to be the god who has to look after that cosmic order, that Rita. Okay. Rita, it's an English word, we add a, but if you look at Sanskrit pronunciation, we call it as Reet. So this is the Reet which has been followed from generation to generation. Here we are referring to the cosmic order. Okay. Then, apart from this, even Soma plant was there. I had mentioned that Soma, it was a plant from which they used to extract a juice, Somras, and they used to drink it. So even Soma plant was worshipped. Apart from this, the other deities were the Vayu god, Vayu, wind god. You know, Hanuman is regarded as Pavanputra. Okay, Pavanputra, god of, Pavanputra, son of Vayu. Okay, then Yama is god of death. Yamraj, and Surya Devta, sun god. Okay, so these were the other important deities. So what we can see over here, the forces of nature, they are personified, they are given the attributes of a god. Okay, apart from this, even female deities were there. Now see, if you look at the entire early Vedic period or the Rig Vedic age, women enjoyed a respectable position, which is also seen over here because we even have female deities. Okay, so important female deities were Usha was considered to be goddess of dawn. Dawn, the early morning period before the sunrise. So Usha was considered to be the goddess of dawn. Ratri, goddess of night. Aditi was considered mother of all the gods. Okay, Aditi, the one who came first. Okay, who was born first. So Aditi, mother of all the gods and goddesses. Prithvi, our Mother Earth. Okay. Now, the next important attribute about the religious features of Vedic age is that we do not find a single temple. So please remember, no temples and no idol worship is a characteristic feature. Remember this point, okay? Because UPSC put such statements in the preliminary examination, okay? So you have to be very specific with the statements. We do not find any temple, we do not find any images of gods and goddesses. Okay. The next important thing is that yajnas were performed. So Rishi Munis, the sages, they used to perform big yajna sacrifices, but not giving any bali of animals and all, nothing like that. Okay. A pure sacrifice, that is a pure yajna used to be performed. And in that yajna, they used to chant different prayers, and the yajna was performed mainly for the welfare of all. Okay, so yajnas were performed by the rishis, by the sages in open space for the welfare of all. Please remember, these yajnas were purely fire yajnas. That is, the fire kund was there and the fire was lit in. All the rishis used to sit together in the open space in the vicinity of Mother Nature, and they used to chant the mantras. And this yajnas, they were performed for the welfare of the community. Okay, so I hope all the important attributes, religious attributes of the early Vedic period are pretty clear. Now let us try to understand the economic structure of the early Vedic period. Okay, so as I have mentioned that Aryans were nomadic people. So what was their primary occupation? They were pastoral in nature. Cattle rearing was their primary occupation. Okay, and cattle was considered to be the source of wealth. So person who had maximum number of cattle, that person was considered to be the wealthy person, and the wealthy person was called as Gomat. So Gomat is the person who is the most richest person. And what do you mean by the richest person? The one who has maximum goes. Goes means cattle. Okay. Then the next important thing was that the next important occupation of Aryans was making chariots, because Aryans, they were the warrior community and they were very much efficient in horse riding. So definitely chariot making was yet another occupation. The next important thing is that what about the trade? Definitely Aryans traded within the community, and the trade was in the barter system. Okay. Uh, Archaeologists have found a gold bar. Okay. And this gold bar is even mentioned in Rig Veda. This gold bar was referred to as Nishka. Please remember this Nishka. So it is said that in the barter system, this Nishka was also used. So in place of Nishka, you will get this many grains. Okay, I have a Nishka, I'll give you a Nishka. In return of Nishka, you have what? You have rice, give me rice. So that is called as a barter system. So please remember, Nishka is not modern day coin. It is not a currency. It is not a coin. It was used for the barter system, and it was a gold bar, a gold bullion, a gold bar. So please remember, this was a PYQ. Okay, the early Vedic, what was the medium of exchange in the early Vedic period, and they had given the options. So please remember, Nishka, the gold bar, was the medium of exchange in the early Vedic period. Okay, I hope all the important aspects of the early Vedic period are pretty clear. So today we have understood the early Vedic period in detail. So where did the Aryans settle? Aryans settle in the Sapta Sindhu basin, river Indus, 5 tributaries of Indus, and river Saraswati. Please remember its Sanskrit names and English names as well. Okay, what is the timeline for the early Vedic period? It is 1500 BC to 1000 BC. Okay, and they settled in the Sapta Sindhu basin. Then we have understood about the polity of Aryans. Polity was tribal in nature. Rajan was elected. Please remember the structure which we have studied. Okay, Grihapati, Kula, Kulapati. That structure you need to remember. The next important thing, please remember all the assemblies. Okay, Vidatha, Sabha, Samiti, Gana. Please remember that. Remember that women were allowed to be the part of these assemblies. Remember the names of the women scholars, Apala, Ghosha, Lopamudra. Okay, you need to remember their names. Then we understood about the religion. Religion was very simple. They personified the nature, gave the attributes of God to the elements of nature. And yajnas were performed in open space for the welfare of the community. No temples, no idol worship. Okay. And the primary occupation was cattle rearing, pastoralism. Apart from that, the other occupations were like making the chariots and all. Okay. And Nishka was the medium of exchange, the barter system. Okay. So this is all about the early Vedic period. In the upcoming session, we are going to cover the later Vedic age. And then we'll be solving the PYQs as well. Okay. That's it for the day. Thank you so much. We'll end the session over here.